This is Sunday's daf. We're in daf Yud Aleph. Says the Gemara. So we're discussing here this whole thing over here about an asham. If an asham is compared to a chattas, if you had in mind shaloi lishmoi, like Rabbi Lezer says, it also ruins the carbon. And according to the Chacham in the Mishnah, only a chattas and a pesach they had the wrong thing in mind possible. But an asham is like any other carbon. The animal is still kosher, except that the owner didn't fulfill their obligation. They still have to go ahead and bring another carbon. So the Gemara Bishleim Rabban, according to Rabban Dam, who say, Asham Shachlish, if you took an Asham, he shechted with the wrong thing in mind, kosher is kosher. Hainu the Iskish. This makes sense now. What we're going to learn in the Brisa in a minute from now. The Brisa says that we compare a carbon mincha to a chattas and to an Asham. Now, why would the Torah compare a carbon mincha to a chattas v'asham unless we can say that they have two different sets of dinim, and sometimes a mincha is like a chattas, and sometimes a mincha is like an asham? It makes sense. But if we follow the view, like Rabbi Lezer, that an asham and chattas are identical, so what does the pasuk mean when it says that a mincha in certain respects is similar to a chattas, and certain respects is similar to an asham? What are we talking about? So Gemara explains. And this is our problem. So they say Asham Shaklish my kosher. They hold that Asham and Chatzas are very different. Hainu the Iskish Minchel Chatzas and Minchel Asham. Certain kinds of Minchas are similar to a Chatzas, and certain kinds are similar to Asham. What's going on? The time we look at the Brisa. That Shimon says Kodesh Kadosh. It says the pasuk that it talks about the mincha shouldn't be chametz, and it says it that a mincha is Kodesh Kadoshim, like a Chatzas and like an Asham. What does that mean? So minchas chayte hareu kechat. Depends what kind of mincha it is. Different kinds of minchas. If the mincha is a sin offering, a minchas chayte, then it's just like a chatas. In what way? Leficha therefore come to shaloi lishma. If you did the kmitza, when you took your fingers there and you took out a piece of the mincha, which is similar to like what we take, it's like the shchit and everything else. If you took the kmitza shaloi lishma, if you did not do it lishma, then psula, it is possible. In other words, it's just like a karbachatas that it is possible. Fine. And minchas adava. What about the minchas purely an offering? On a dava, a voluntary offering, then had a kosher, which means that if you had loy lishma, it's still a kosher a carbon, just like you're not yoitz. If it comes to lishma, okay, it makes sense. According to Rabbi Lazar, who says that Osham and the Chatzis both have exactly the same din. Why would the Torah say it's like a chattas, like asham? It's like that. It's the same thing. It seems really redundant. So the Gemara says, you know why? Because you think that we're talking here about the din of loy lishma. There's another din that we learn now, that sometimes a mincha is like a chattas and something like an asham, nothing unrelated to loy lishma, and that's what the pasuk is talking about. And it's the same Rav Shimon who says that. And what is that? The red is regarding whether you have to actually use a vessel to transport the kmitza to the mizbech, to Rosh Mizbech, or is it you take with your hand, take a piece with your hand, with your fingers there, and bring it to the mizbech? And is there a difference, the right hand or the left hand? So the Gemara says as follows. The Tanakh we learned the Tanakh says that if a carbon mincha, just like needs, just like over there you need kabbalah and a keli by an animal, so too by mincha you have to transport it in a keli and deliver it to the mizbeach. However, Rav Shimon says machshir, you have an alternative. You can either use a keli or use your hand. It makes no difference. My time Rav Shimon, what's his svara? Amakros and the pasuk. Kodesh kadoshim he kachatas koshem. Sometimes it's like a chatas, and sometimes koshem. If you remember, we just learned before. We learned yesterday in yesterday's Gemara that a chatas you use your finger to sprinkle the blood, and by an asham you use a vessel. So the pasuk says kachatas kasham. You have a choice. You can either use your hand to deliver the kmitza, or you can use a vessel. And this goes as follows. If you're going to use your hand like a karbachatas, then you have to do like a karbachatas. Is oivda b'yamin. You have to do it with your right hand. And how you learn by chatas, you have to do right hand. You have exerishava etzba from we'll learn the Gemara later on. And kechatas. But if you do it b'kli, if you're using a vessel, then that's like an asham. Oivda b'smal. You can do it with your left hand. Ke'asham. So that's what that pasuk is for. The Gemara, what do you understand? It's the same Rav Shimon. How can you learn two different things from the same pasuk? Rav Shimon, Haikra, Maple Lahachi. He uses the pasuk for right hand, left hand, with the keli, with the hand, and then whether Shaloi Lishma is possible depends if it's Mitchas Chayta, Mitchas Adava. Says the Gemara, no problem. Lahachi ike the primary purpose of this pasuk, like Rabbi Yehuda, to tell you if you use a keli or use your hand, which hand you should use. Minchas chayte the psula shalei lishma is the time achinu that he lives somewhere else. He actually learns. How do you know that loy lishma is no good for somewhere else? Because it says, you know what? You know how you know what minchas chayte if you had loy lishma is possible? Not because we learn from the pasuk kodesh kadoshim he chachatz kadoshim. No, we use that for hand and keli. So where does he taka know? He knows it from because it says in pasuk. He minchas chayte. It says a pasuk that this is a minchas. It says chatos who. It says again. It says kodesh kadoshim he. It says in the word he is minchas chayte not miksip he. Just like by a carbon, we learned before. It says the word who. Sorry, it says the word who by a chatos. It says the name chatos who, which tells us that what that this is how it has to be. It has to make it l'shem chatos. So too, when it comes to a minchas chayte, it says over there that you should bring her to the kohen, and it says chatos he. It's a carbon chatos. And therefore, we know that you have to make it the same. The mincha also has to be done for the sake of a chatas, otherwise it's possible. According to the Rabbanon, the mahilchas iskish osham lechatas. When the Torah says kachatas, that a chatas is like an osham, kachatas ka osham Torah achas. What does Chacham do with that? Rabbi Lezer said that they have the same din like the Shmoi, and he learns all that. But according to Chacham, they don't have the same din. So what does the Torah mean? Lezer will tell you machatas to the smicha, just like a korban chatas requires smicha. Is so too af osham towen smicha. In that regard, they're the same. They both require a smicha. You have to press your hand on it. Then the Mishnah had another din. Came along Yosef ben Chayni and said, "Now that you tell me that a carbon Pesach, if you have in mind the wrong carbon during the time of carbon, it should be carbon Pesach. If you had in mind another carbon, it's possible, right? And so I say the same thing is that if you did a shlamim and you had in mind a carbon Pesach during that window, it's possible. Normally, a shlamim, you have the wrong thing in mind. The animal's kosher, just you're not yotzei. But if you had, just like a Pesach had in mind a shlamim, it's possible. So a shlamim had in mind a Pesach is also possible during that window. Now, what would he hold Yosef B'chayri regarding carbon chatas? Could be said a chatas also. If he had a chatas in mind a shlamim, it's possible. What would he hold regarding a shlamim? With a chatas, we'll see the Gemara later. Says the Gemara, said Yosef ben Chayni, it seems that Yosef ben Chayni and Rabbi Lezer are actually saying the same thing. That and we'll soon explain. And the Rabbi said, and we're going to go now through the whole discussion again of different of Rabbi Lezer, and then we'll see how that you can learn that either Rabbi Lezer agrees with Yosef ben Chayni or not necessarily so, as we'll see in a minute. Says the Gemara, and Rabbi says. No, you say that Rabbi Yosef and Chayni and Rabbi Lezer say the same thing. I'm telling you that they're arguing when it comes to Karban Chatas. When it comes to Karban Pesach, you're right. They're both saying the same thing. That if you did a Shlamim, the same Pesach, it's possible. But if you did a Shlamim, the same Chatas, we're going to see there's an argument. And you'll see it from the discussion of Rabbi Lezer. That goes as follows. The Tanya we learned, a Karban Pesach has to be under a year old to be kosher. If it's over a year old, it's possible. A Karban Pesach has a window between noon, the way we learned till now, we'll see the Mishnah soon, argues, but between noon and evening, that's the window. That's the only time kosher. If you're reading Karban Pesach after that, prior to that, it's possible. These are the two psul Karban Pesach. Time we learned HaPesach it's over a year old, and then, but nevertheless, v'shachted bizmana, you shechted during that window at a Pesach, and l'shmoy, you had in mind a Karban Pesach. Well, it's possible. That's case number one. Case number two, the chain likewise hashoichet acherim l'shem Pesach bizmana. You took a Karban Shlamim, and you had in mind a Karban Pesach for Erev Pesach. Bizmane, it is possible. Pesach. Sorry, this is case number two. Rabbi Lezer says it's possible. In both of these cases, it is possible. Right? So what's case number two? You took a shlamim, you had in mind a Karban Pesach, it is possible. And so they're not talking about Karban Chatas, they're only talking about Pesach. And it sounds exactly like Yosef ben Chayni. What we don't know yet is what he would hold by Karban Chatas if he did a shlamim and had in mind a Chatas. And Rabbi Yeshua Machshir. Now let's go there. Now we're going to have a conversation again. It's amazing how Rabbi Yeshua Rabbi Lezer, the Mishnah records, or the Braises record their entire conversations. We have another Mishnah as well of Psachim. Says the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Shua said, I don't understand. In B'Shayim B'Yisashana, the rest of the year, She'enu kosher l'shmai. The rest of the year, if you take a Korban Pesach and you bring it l'shem Pesach, it's possible. Yet I'm right. Achedim kshedim l'shmai. But if others, you took a shlamim and you had in mind a Korban Pesach throughout the year, kosher, like you had before. So bizmanoi. So surely, when it comes to Erev Pesach, if he took a Korban Pesach and he had in mind a Korban Pesach, shu kosher, lishmoi. Ain't surely there should be that if you took a shlamim and you had in mind the Pesach, it should be kosher as well. Sheyichshur achedim lishmoi. If the whole year when a Korban Pesach, you brought a whole year Korban Pesach, you had in mind a Korban Pesach, it's possible. But a shlamim for the sake of Pesach would be kosher. Then surely at a Pesach, when the Korban Pesach itself is kosher, when you had in mind the Pesach, surely a shlamim for Pesach should be kosher. Okay, it wasn't Yaitza his chay, but it should be kosher. Amr Rabbi said this is a weak Kalochemer. Because if you follow this Kalochemer, I can come along with make a new chiddush that you never heard of. And it goes as follows, following your logic. May make the other way around. The rest of the year, the rest of the year, you did a Korban Pesach, and you had it in mind for Pesach, it's possible. Yet, but if you took the Korban Pesach and you had in mind shlamim the rest of the year, it's kosher, right? We had before that a Pesach becomes a shlamim, even stam. So surely, if you took a Pesach, you had in mind a shlamim, it's kosher. So what madach a whole year? If you did a Pesach, the same Pesach is possible. But if you did a Pesach, the same shlam is kosher. She'ered Pesach, if you did a Pesach, the same Pesach, of course it's kosher. Then surely if you did a Pesach, the same shlam, it should be kosher, not a Pesach, following your logic. When it's kosher to do Pesach, surely you should be kosher if you did a Pesach having a minor shlamim. The yuchsher Pesach ba'ba'asar shalai l'shmai. Following your logic, it should be kosher. The kachat oimen. Are you going to say that? Number one, doesn't make sense. Another thing he says here is, another thing is he says, Abelazar is saying to Abishua, counter Abishua. Mali huchshru achedim b'shah yemaisa shana l'shmai. You know what are you comparing? Any whole kalchem is faulty. When you take other animals and you shechted the same Pesach. Sorry? Oh, you take other animals and you shechted the same Pesach a whole year. It is kosher. You know why? Shekenu kosher, l'shem achedim, because the shlab, the Pesach itself, if you have other kabbalas in mind, it is kosher. So other kabbalas, if you had Pesach in mind, it's kosher because it doesn't matter what carbon it is. A Pesach for other kabbalas, Pesach is all kosher. So you want that v'yuchshru achedim bizman l'shmoi, and you want to go ahead and make kosher. That if you want to say that if you, in your logic, you Rabbi Shua, in your logic, you want to say that if you take a shlamim, Erev Pesach, and you had in mind a Korban Pesach, it should be kosher. Shekenu pasul shevacheda. But at that time, if you took the Pesach and had in mind a shlamim, it would be pasul. Since the reason why the rest of the year, if you took a shlamim and had in mind a Pesach, it's kosher, because if you did the Pesach and had in mind a shlamim, it's kosher. It goes both ways. But Erev Pesach, if you took a Pesach and you had in mind a shlamim, it's possible. So if you took a shlamim and had a mind Pesach, it's also possible. The same logic, it works both ways there. That's kosher. It works both ways here. It's possible. Your kavuchem doesn't make sense. Rabbi Shua said, in Cain, following your logic, it seems like a shlamim is even stronger than a Korban Pesach. Because a shlamim throughout the year, if you have the wrong things in mind, it's kosher. But yet when the shlamim, you have in mind a Korban Pesach and this man, it becomes possible. And yet a Korban Pesach the rest of the time, if you have in mind a shlamim, it's kosher. It comes out that we're stricter with the shlamim than with the Pesach. It doesn't make sense. So Chazar Abelazar says, I'll give you a new basis for what I'm saying. The Danu Din Acha. He says, you want to know my logic, why a Korban Pesach, if you have the wrong thing in mind, is possible? I'll tell you why. Matzinu Moisa Pesach. What happened the rest of the year? What happens if you have a Korban Pesach that's extra? What happens? You set aside two animals, one you brought Korban Pesach, and now you have another one. What happens? It becomes a shlamim. So the Pesach naturally becomes a shlamim. The ain moisa shlamim ba Pesach, but you don't find anywhere that the leftovers of a shlamim becomes a Pesach. So therefore, Uma Pesach, Madach Korban Pesach, Shemoisrei ba shlamim, but the leftovers of Pesach become a shlamim, or after the first Erev Pesach becomes a shlamim. Shachta bizmana, yet if you, so there's a connection between Pesach and shlamim. natural connection. And yet, if Erev Pesach, when you're supposed to shech the Pesach and you had in mind the shlamim, what happens? It's possible, some possible. So a shlamim which has really no connection to Pesach, there's no natural progression there. She'ein moisim ba Pesach, doesn't come to Pesach. Im shachtem l'shem Pesach bisman. If you took a shlamim, you had in mind the current Pesach, which is totally different carbon, surely it's possible. Of course, I'm right. He says, if you took a shlamim, you had in mind the Pesach, Erev Pesach, it should be possible. Amalai Rabbi Shua said, Matzinu, following your logic, Matzinu Moise Chatas Ba'olam, we find that the leftover of a Chatas becomes an oil. What do you left over? You set aside $100 for karma Chatas, and all you needed was 90. You have some excess money. Or you set aside 2 animals for an insurance policy, and then one animal, there was no problem, so you use one animal chatas, the next animal is left over. What happens to a leftover animal? We learned before already, you put it as a dessert on the mizbech. But tzinu moise chatas ba oila, the leftover chatas becomes an oila. But the ein moise oila ba chatas, but you don't find anywhere that leftover of an oila turns into a chatas. And yet, uma chatas shemoise ba oila, a chatas that naturally progresses and becomes an oila. Shachtel l'shem oila. If you shechted for an oila, it is possible. If you shechted for an oila, it is possible. So oila, an oila, she'ein moisa ba chatas. So an oila that does not become a chatas, shachtel l'shem chatas, be shechted for the sake of a chatas, ein a din. Surely should take psula. So surely it should be possible if you shechted that an oila, and you had in mind that the oila should be a chatas, surely it should be possible. Amaloi Rabbi Lezer said to him, "Loi no, if amr bechatas, you know why by a chatas she can't shada lishma kol hashana kula. A chatas year round, if you had in mind a chatas is kosher. Toimer bepesach, when it comes to a pesach, he said, Rabbi Shua is saying to Rabbi Lezer, according to your logic, then just like we all agree that a karma chatas, if he did it loy lishmoi, it is possible. According to your logic, then if he did an animal and had in mind a chat, a shlamim for a chat, it should also be possible. But I know you don't hold that. So why should a Pesach be any different that you hold by a Pesach that a shlamim you had in mind a Pesach at a Pesach it's ruined? What's the difference? So Rabbi Lezer says, "Lo no. Imam bechat, you know what by a chatas she can't change chatas is kosher all year long, and therefore we're lenient. And if you made an animal for the sake of a chatas, that animal shlamim b'chatas, the shlamim is kosher. You just need to fulfill your mitzvah. But toimed b'pesach, when it comes to a korban pesach, she'einu kosher l'shmoi. When it comes to a korban pesach, it is not kosher l'shmoi elav man. It's only a short window that it's kosher if you have in mind a korban pesach. And v'hoyel who pasal l'shmoi, and since that if you what do you call it? That it is possible if it's not done l'shmoi in that short window, dinu, it makes sense. She yivslu achein l'shmoi, that other animals, if we did have in mind the current pesach, should be possible. You know, Rabbi Lezer is saying here the way Rabbi said that's only limited to korban pesach that I hold this, not when it comes to korban chatas. He said when it comes to a chatas, since all year long you can bring a korban chatas, so we're lenient. Okay, chatas, you had the wrong korban in mind, it's possible, but you had another korban in mind for a chatas, shlamim for a chatas doesn't matter. But when it comes to a korban pesach, because you have a short window that has to be lishmoi, and if you don't do lishmoi, it's possible. So any animal, if he did it in the same pesach, it is possible as well. Then the Mishnah continues. Shimon, the brother of Azariah, which we had in Morasait already, that he supported his brother. Azariah supported Shimon, and therefore they made a contract that you'll learn, I'll do business, and we'll be equal partners. And therefore Azariah gets all the credit or equal credit to Shimon's learning. And he came along, and this is what he said. He said that if it depends if it goes up or goes down. If you're changing the carbon to something higher level, for example, you're kachim kalam, shlamim, and you had in mind a carbon chatas or a carbon oila, it's all right. It's not possible. It's kosher. But if you were, let's say, an oila, you had in mind, you reduced it. You had in mind, let's say, a carbon shlamim, which is a kachim kalim, then it's possible. So Gemara says, what's the logic there? Rav Ashi must make Rav Yechon, Rav Achber must make Rav Yana. My time, but what's the spot of the Shimon Achazayah, the Makro? It says in Pasuk, It says v'lo yechalu as kachim Yisrael. You shouldn't desecrate, or won't desecrate. Kachim Yisrael eis asher yorimu Hashem, that which you will separate to Hashem. So we Yerima also means to lift. In other words, when won't it be a chilul? When do we say it's not rude? When do we say it's not desecrated? If you gave it a lift. So if you lifted, in other words, you were kachim kalim, you were shlamim, and you lifted it, you made it into an oila, you said oila emes chalet, doesn't get rude. But benamuch man, we infer, but the other way around, you started off on a high point and you worked your way down. You said it was an oila, and you said, "Oh, I have a mind of shlamim." You went down, mischalet. That's the Gemara. Do by kavanas. But by like Shmuel, don't we learn Shmuel's didn't from here? Shmuel said, "Benign. How do you know if somebody eats tevel is toiv loy that you didn't yet give the truma the ma'aser? How do you know shula misa? How do you know you actually get misa for that? And then it says, "V'lo yechalu is kachim b'nei Yisrael." You shouldn't desecrate the kachim b'nei Yisrael. Eis asher yorimu Hashem, that which you will separate to Hashem. In other words, you haven't yet separated. So we're talking about truma and ma'aser that haven't been done. And it says, you shouldn't be mechal. Not you shouldn't be mechal. And we have a gzera shava from chilul that you get misa. We learn another Gemara. So bottom line is, we're learning to do with tevel, nothing to do with karbonis, reducing or increasing, the level of kedusha. So we learn two things from it. Because im kain so little kroasha humu, that you separated. So we know we're talking about tevel, true ma'aser. Ma'asha yorimu, you will separate shmamatad. We learn two things. We learn two things from it. We learn the idea of truma and ma'aser tevel, and we learn that you are going to separate. You're going to change the animal from what it is to something higher. Then it's all right. Something lower is not all right. Says the Gemara, so what exactly is Shimon Acher Zarya saying? He's saying that if let's say you took a korban shlam, you had in mind oil is kosher. What does kosher mean? Does kosher mean like all the cases we learned till now? It's that the animal is kosher, you can eat it, but you haven't fulfilled your obligation. Or does he go a step further? Then not only is it kosher, but you also fulfill your obligation. How far does it go? So the Gemara, Sheda the Eimratzin. Does the Rabzeda say that it's kosher? I had a question. Is he saying that it's kosher, but you weren't atoned? So therefore, he only argues in one case. He only argues if you go down. He only argues in case where you went down. He says it's possible. You say it's kosher. He holds not only if it goes down is it possible, but how it goes up. Not only is it kosher, but also you fulfilled your obligation. He argues on both points. I want to buy some buyer. Toshma coming here. It says in the Baraisa that a b'choid and a mice you shech the mice and the 10th animal. You shech the l'shem shlamim kshedim. It's kosher. Shlamim sheshachtan. You shech for shlamim. It's kosher. Wrong carbon, but it's kosher. You haven't filled your obligation. But shlamim. Now, a shlamim is a higher level than b'choir and ma'aser. Shlamim requires smicha, requires the waving of the chazay and the sheikh. So shlamim is stricter. So what happens if you did a shlamim sheshachtel l'shem b'choir or l'shem ma'aser? If you did a shlamim, you went down. Sure, it's possible. But remember, these are all kachim kalim. Now, these you can tell me kshedim when you say kosher. The chiddush is umerati. Not only kosher, you filled your obligation. That what? You atoned, not your full obligation, but you atoned. Meratz is more than that. Meratz means that atoned your kapara, whatever your kapara is. The b'choir bar ritzu. A b'choir is a bar ritzu. You have a b'choir, you have the obligation. B'choir, that's it. It's over. You shechted it. So the whole concept of ritzu doesn't apply. So why are we talking about b'choir? El kshedim must be when we say kosher, it means kshedim. That's it. It's kosher, you're allowed to eat it. But where you need ritzu, it did not do the ritzu. Says the Gemara, when the say for kshedim meratzin, since the end of the Bryce, we're talking about b'choir. Obviously, he's not talking about meratzin. So therefore, reishinami kshedim meratzin. When it talks about the first case where you went up to a shlamim, it means that it's kosher, and but you still have to bring another one. Says the Gemara, what's the proof? Midei Ilya, does it say that it's all the same? How can he say where shayich it's shayich, by a shlamim it's shayich, by a b'choir it's not shayich, it's not shayich. You kill the b'choir, that's it, it's over. Elamai kamashmalon. So what's he trying to tell you here? Gevaya he's trying to tell you if you went up the ladder or you went down the ladder. Tanina will it not Mishnah. Kate said it's clearly not Mishnah. What's he adding here? It says in the Brisa, it says in the Mishnah, Kocha you went down to Kocha Kalim is possible, and Kocha Kalim went up to Kocha Kocha is kosher. What's he tell me our story? Shlamim b'choir. Says Gemara, no, there's a big chiddush here. I would have thought kotche kotchim v'kotche kalim. I would have thought gvoy namach is only if it's two separate dimensions. For example, kotche kotchim versus kotche kalim. But within the sphere of kotchim kalim, there's no real hierarchy. Maybe there's no hierarchy. It's all the same. So that's a chiddush. We learned shlamim koymin is abchayr. Shlamim comes before abchayr. If neishain tunim, because a shlamim requires many more activities when you bring it up. Which one you bring first? It requires matan arba. You have to bring four corners. Or smicha, you have to press down. Unasachim libations. Or truvas chazei b'shoik. Says, what are you right? Ha ikir ahi agran nazba. Here's the ikir. Over there we just mentioned derech agav. It mentions it. Now the next Mishnah gets a little bit easier. Mishnah. HaPesach sheshachtu, the Korban Pesach. Till now we assume the Korban Pesach is from Chatzos until night. That's the window of Korban Pesach. What about in the morning? We assume
just not going back. Do we actually hold like that?
Now what?
That it's kosher if you're going up, but not kosher if you're going down, or is it just the pilpul?
That's Shimon of Chazayim. The Chacham argue.
Right.
The Chacham argue. So we don't follow that. No. No. Says the Gemara, Mishnah. HaPesach sheshachtu shachris. The Korban Pesach is shechted in the morning by Arba Osa, right? Shaloi lishmai. But you do not have in mind the Korban Pesach, which is the right thing, because it's not the time for Korban. Rabbi Shua said kosher. Machshir, it's kosher. Ki'ilu nishchim b'shloish Osa, because Erev Pesach in the morning is no different than 13th day of Nisan, because it's nothing to do with Pesach. However, Ben Psei the Posel. Then Psei says that the entire day Erev Pesach is connected to Pesach, and therefore you should have brought it the same Pesach. You ruined it. It's as if you shechted in the afternoon. The Gemara will explain. Shimon said, I heard from 72 rabbis. The Gemara will talk later about that. The day they promoted Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah to become the Nasi, they appointed him. Be yeshiva in yeshiva. Kol hazvachim, any korban, hanecholin, only those korbanos that are eaten. In other words, oil is not included. Shenizbechu shaloi lishman. If you had in mind the wrong korban, shein the kosher. Shlamim for this and that. It's all kosher. A shlamim for a chatzah is kosher. And so the baalim shechay, but they haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. Chutz min Pesach min chatzah, except Pesach chatzah. So what's Ben Azai adding on our previous Mishnah? He adds only the korban oila. He said that oila is not included. If you made a mistake and had in mind an oila, it's not kosher. The Chacham didn't agree. So now we want to quickly understand what's this thing about Erev Pesach. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yishia, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yishia. Machshir hoye ben Pseidah. It seems from here that ben Pseidah allowed the Pesach sheshachtu shachris ba'arba asar l'shmoi. Now ben Pseidah holds the entire Erev Pesach is suitable for Korban Pesach. The kuliyem azimnuhu. Entire Erev Pesach is kosher for Korban. So what do you mean ki'ilu as if you brought in the afternoon? Who cares about afternoon if it's all day is kosher? Oh, I need the but Rabbi Shua. Of course, Rabbi Shua used that term ki'ilu as if it was brought the 13 days. So he added as if it was brought in the afternoon. So it's a simple question. So what Ben Pseidah really saying that Erev Pesach in the morning you can bring a Korban Pesach? So why is the Mishnah talking about such a strange case where you brought the Pesach in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, but you had in mind the wrong korban and it's possible? Just tell us outright that 10 o'clock in the morning you can bring a Korban Pesach. It would have been so much easier because you have a whole day now to bring all the Yidden. You can bring a Korban Pesach. Make life a lot easier than what it was. If so, if that's pshat, why the other case where you had the wrong korban in mind? Argue we had the right korban in mind. So think about it. If they would have argued by the case with the right korban in mind, I would have thought, I would have thought, okay, that Ben Pseidah holds you can bring the korban all day long. Rabbi Shua holds no, you can't. But what happens if you brought in the morning and you had the wrong korban in mind? Maybe Rabbi Shua will say, you know what? Even though you couldn't really bring a Korban Pesach yet, but it's still Erev Pesach, it's possible. Maybe. Since it's a little bit suitable, because Erev Pesach, and therefore maybe the korban should be possible. That even so, it's not possible at all. There's no connection at all between Korban Pesach and Erev Pesach in the morning. Says the Gemara, I don't understand Ben Pseidah. For Ksiv, it says, Beino Abayim. Doesn't the pasuk clearly say that the Korban Pesach should be brought Kol Kal as well Beino Abayim? It should be brought in the afternoon. So Gemara gives a new pshat now. Amaru leBnei Rav Eloi Bein Shnei Aravim. it means between the two evenings. And evening, the first evening is when it ends, which is the first thing in the morning. So between the morning and the night is the suitable time for the Korban Pesach. Says the Gemara, if so, a Korban Tamid, by Korban Tamid, you find the same expression. The Sivit says you bring one kevis in the morning, and the second one you bring in the afternoon. Bein or abayim. So according to you, you have all day to bring the Korban Tamid, the Daven Mincha. Is Hachinam in Kul Yom Kosher? Says the Gemara, no. How can you say that? Hasam there, it says as a kevis tasa babayka. You bring one kevis in the morning. And then it's in the second one you bring Bein Abayim. Obviously, we're not talking about the same time, not overlapping. So here it's clear Bein Abayim is afternoon. By Korban Pesach, all it has is Bein Abayim. It could mean from morning till night. Says the Gemara, McLeod the Bein Abayim Mamish. So maybe so it means what? Afternoon. So you want to ask the question, who said? Maybe the Talmud in the morning is limited to the morning, but the other Talmud, you have all day to bring it. Either Kuliyama. The rest, the other one is Bein Abayim. You're telling me Bein Abayim means from morning till night. So maybe the second Korban you can bring any time during the day, but the first one is limited to the morning. Says the Gemara, no. It says the pasuk is a keves ha'echad. There's only one Korban available in the morning. Echad b'boker v'lo shnayim b'boker. So that's how we know their Bein Abayim means limited to the afternoon. Says the Gemara, fine. What about Neidos, lighting the candles of the Beis Hamikdash? There also it says there. The Chesiv says, it says there, Bein or Abayim. So when should Adam bring it? Bahalas Adam said it is Bein or Abayim. So why do we say the same thing? That it should be the entire afternoon. According to you, it should be the whole entire day. We know that the candle in the late afternoon. The entire day should be kosher, according to you, Bem Seder, and the Aboish's understanding of Bem Seder. So I think more the Shiny House is different. The Chesiv says, May Erev V'Ad. It says in the pasuk that you should light from the evening until the morning. It says clearly when should those candles start burning? From the evening. So we know Bein Abayim means in the afternoon. The Tanya we learned, and how do we know? Because it says the Brayso, 10 lamidas, put enough oil in that should burn the entire night. So clearly the Torah there says it means night. Another pshat is what do you mean, that there's no other avodah that is kosher the entire night, only this particular avodah. Knows all other avodas during the day has to be done during the day. You know, any other avodah has to be finished by day. This is the only avodah you start by day and it goes through the entire night. Says the Gemara, this is the last thing you do. Says the Gemara, okay, we're back to Titus. The Chesiv by Titus, it says also, it says Bein Abayim. And so according to your logic, it says Yaktanen of Titus, and they talk about Titus as well. It says Bein Abayim. You can bring Titus all day long. We know it's not. It's late in the afternoon. It's one of the last activities. Shining Titus, the Iskis or Natus. Because in that pasuk it says when you light the candles, you bring the Titus. So the Titus has to be brought at the same time you light the candles. So obviously it's late afternoon. Hasan Nami said so over there also. It says, Shom Tizbach es hazevach, you should shech the Korban Pesach. It says this, sorry, Tizbach es ha-Pesach. It says Be'erev. It says clearly Be'erev in the evening, based on everything you said till now, even though it says Bein Abayim, but it says Be'erev in the evening, so it means in the afternoon. So the Gemara, you know what that is? That's coming to tell you that even though, according to say that you can do it all day, what happens? It comes the time of the Korban Tamid Shabbat, comes the time of Mincha. You would think, well, I can push the Mincha off because I got to bring Korban Pesach. He says, no. If it comes time of Mincha, first bring the Korban Tamid Shabbat Abayim. No, you can bring the Korban Tamid Pesach from the morning and onwards. But when it comes to time of Mincha, wait, bring the Korban Tamid Shabbat Abayim, and then bring the Korban Pesach. And how do I know that? The Tanya, you should delay something. Shenema boy Ba'erev, Ubein Ha'abayim, because regarding the Pesach it says Ba'erev, right? It says Tizbach as a Pesach Ba'erev, and the Bein Abayim. Le Davish Le'ebai Ela Bein Abayim Abayim. When it comes to the Talmud Shebein Abayim, it says only Bein Abayim. And Korban Pesach, you have also the added word Ba'erev. So now you have a choice of dilemma. Which one should I do? It's this man of Mincha, of Talmud Shebein Abayim. Do the Talmud Shebein first. And in fact, so what are you talking about? It doesn't make sense. You told me if you can do in the morning, it's all right. Now someone has to be delayed. It doesn't make sense. If this started, you would think in logic, if this started prior to the Talmud Shebein Abayim, even though now is the time of the Abayim, you should bring Korban Pesach first. It was already started earlier. So the Gemara, yes, we find a precedent. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Halacha, mispalo shel mincha ba'achar mispalo shel musafit. If mincha can be musaf can be davened all the time, but if it comes a time of mincha, pause and first daven musaf. First daven mincha, then daven musaf. And there's a big argument comes in Kippur, what are you supposed to do? If you delay that the time of musaf starts where you can daven mincha already, what should you be doing? Okay, we'll stop over here. And I'm sure you'll continue with Shem the next year. Okay, have an easy Thomas.
Well, what about Todir V'Shena, Todir Kodim? Therefore, Mincha should come before Pesach.
That's a good question. Good question. But we have a concept we'll learn later, Todir or Mekudesh. If you have something which is Todir, a carbon Tamid, we'll learn later, Tzadik Aleph, if you have only enough money for one carbon, either a carbon Tamid or a carbon Musaf. And Musaf is holy. What's more important, Tadir or Mekudesh? Mm-hmm. And we actually had in Hodius 2 rules. Tadir, Tadir, Kodesh. We also had that Kodesh comes first. But the Gemara in Hodius doesn't discuss if the 2 clash, which one takes precedence. In the Gemara Tzadik Aleph, the Gemara doesn't really resolve it. I'm sure you'll talk about it when you get there. So over here also, the Korban Pesach, because it's chorus involved, is like in a way Mekudesh versus that. But good question.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I have a Yitanis, everybody, and a good job.
Oh, so